First off, my name is Jason Weathersby and I work for Mozilla, and what I'm gonna be doing is going through a set of slides first, but I'm hoping for the most part that I'll be doing just live demos, showing you several devices, showing you several of the tools that we now have available to connect with iOS, Safari on iOS, Android, Chrome on Android, and things like that. But I'm also going to do a walkthrough on what FireFox OS is, so basically getting everybody up to speed on what the kind of things that we're building at Mozilla now. So if that's okay with everybody else, I'll just get started. This is a very, very bad diagram of what FireFox OS is. I'm going to talk about it first, and then I'll step into the tools. Essentially, FireFox OS is basically an HTML5 mobile operating system. And it's not just for phones, as I'll show you in just a minute, but at its layer, it has three layers: Gonk, Gaia, and Gecko. Gonk is the lowest level, and it's kind of like it's basically a Linux kernel. On the Gecko side, that's the next level up. It's the same Gecko that we use in our browser. The only addition to it is we have a set of web APIs that allow us to interact with hardware on whatever device we're running it on. So that's what Gecko is. And then on top of that is Gaia. Gaia is the operating system, essentially. And this is what all our system apps are written in, and it's all written in HTML5. That's HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. So writing an app for FireFox OS is no different than writing an app for a website. The only difference is you add a manifest file, and I'll show that in a minute. So those are the three layers that make up FireFox OS. Why did we create FireFox OS? The world needs another mobile operating system, doesn't it? Well, the reason we developed FireFox OS was for a lot of reasons. We don't like the closed ecosystems of the two main competitors in the market, right? They're very closed ecosystems. We wanted an open ecosystem where anybody could develop an app, and where you didn't have to have specialized training in Objective-C or Java for that matter. And that's why we went with HTML5, because we feel like it's just simpler to write apps for HTML5 than it is for those other two environments. But our initial releases of phones were targeted at the emerging markets, people coming from flip phones and getting them on a smartphone, getting them on a smartphone. And the whole idea was to make these cost effective, not high cost phones like iPhone, for example. So we initially targeted emerging markets, wanted very affordable hardware, and we didn't want to have people to have to use a credit card to buy things online. So all the carriers that carry a FireFox OS phone allow you to buy stuff and get billed directly from the phone company or the carrier. It's web technologies through and through. And so far we've released in 29 countries, including Brazil and Germany and Poland. It's going to be, in the second half of this year, we're releasing in parts of the Middle East and Africa through Orange, which is a carrier in that region. We have 13 operators, Telefonica, Telenor. So far we have 16 smartphones, but that list is going to be greatly bumped up in the next couple months with the Orange coming online. And this was announced last week, is Mozilla's partnering with a couple partners like Verizon to produce a set of various form factor type phones, flip, slides, and slate type phones. So that'll be those set of phones will be coming out in 2016. All right. This was announced last week as well. Panasonic just released a Ultra HD 4K TV that runs FireFox OS. So FireFox OS, like I said, is not just a telephone operating system or mobile operating system, but it can also be used in different hardware, i.e. this TV. And it's a very, very nice TV, high end. So it's going to be on several of their high-end models. Not just that. Has anybody ever used a Chromecast? Okay, so we have a company that developed something called Matchstick, which essentially does the same streaming services. It runs FireFox OS as well. Back in late December, KDDI, which is a company in Japan, released an open web board for IoT operations that runs FireFox OS. And it's drag and drop type of IoT operations. There's some great videos on it on YouTube. Telenor has got an IoT project going along. That's that red box you see over there on the right that basically has an always-on camera. So that's, and then also FireFox OS has been ported to Raspberry Pi. And we've also written plenty of applications to show communicating from a FireFox OS phone to a FireFox OS phone to a Node, Raspberry Pi running Node. This device right here is our Flame device. It's a developer device, and it's more of a high-end device. It's kind of mid-range, has two SIM cards, has a gig of memory in it, nice processor. So we've been using these for developer programs, passing them out for people to build apps with and things like that. If you want, after the class is over with, you can come by and take a look at one of them and play with it if you want. All right, so from a standpoint of Mozilla, we've always supported the open web. That's our mission. We want the web to be open, not controlled by IE, not controlled by Google, not controlled by Safari. We want an open web where anyone can develop an app for it and have very few barriers to entry. So for us, an app for this device is nothing more than an HTML5 app. You write an app for your website or whatever, it can be converted and ran on the phone. And generally in a very quick order, and I'll explain what I mean by that. The only thing that we have to add to a FireFox OS device, a web app to run on a FireFox OS device, is a manifest file. And this is a JSON formatted file that basically gives descriptions of where you want your logo, icons for the phone. Also, in addition to that, we do have a permission set of APIs, and I'll explain that in just a second. A set of privileged apps, you got different types of privileges that they can use, whether they can use a certain API or not. You'll add entries to this to describe what APIs on the phone you want to use. And generally the user will be prompted to let them know, like say for geolocation, you'll be prompted to see if you can actually use geolocation. So that's what essentially the job of the manifest file is. So if you already have a web app, chances are if it doesn't use any specific hardware APIs, you can add a manifest file and just put it on the device. And putting it on the device is very, very simple. I'll explain in just a second. We have three types of apps that you can run on a FireFox OS device. The hosted apps are apps code that's actually located on your server. You add a manifest file to it, and they just point the phone to it, and it'll install the manifest and get all the proper pointers so the phone can run the app right there. Then we have privileged apps. These are apps that are going to use certain APIs that are covered under permissions. And they are zipped up in a zip file and go through our marketplace review and can be put on the phone. Now they can also be just pushed to the phone directly from your laptop as well, very simply, and I'm going to show a couple of examples of that in just a minute. Then we have what we have is certified apps. Now currently these are part of the OS, and really just Mozilla and the partners, the telecom partners can write those apps. That said, we use that layer for APIs that we want to go up the chain. For example, we just added WebNFC to the privileged level, but it started at a certified level. So it's a way of testing it to make sure the API is secure and we don't have any breach and no one's information is stolen or anything like that. So that's the three types of apps we have. An app can be installed in a couple different ways. You can push it from your laptop. You can install it from our marketplace, and I'll show a couple screenshots of that in a minute. Or you can use the Moz Apps API inside your web application to just say install, and you pass it to manifest URL. And from the phone, you'll either get an on success or an on error handler. You can see both of those. And the only thing you have to make sure is that you have the MIME type I'm showing down below there added to the server that's serving up that JavaScript there. All right, the other place is the FireFox OS Marketplace. And you go, okay, the world just needs another marketplace, right? But understand that the marketplace code is open source as well. You can create your own marketplace. We do have, you can purchase apps through here, but a lot of them are free too. So, and also, we'll talk about payments in a minute, but we also support in-app payments as well. But so that's the marketplace. I'll give you some examples of some of the apps that are on FireFox OS. This is the core home screen, written in HTML5. I'll debug that app in shortly, and you'll see it. Settings app looks very familiar if you've done Android programming, right? Email, calendar, clock. and we got an FM radio on it for the retro. And then this is our marketplace app on the actual phone. And then we have here maps for maps. And so for the social side, we got Twitter, Facebook, BuzzFeed, Message Me. There's several of them, YouTube. And then what most people do with their mobile devices is they do hard work and build clients and make great things. No, most people play games, right? So we have a set of games. That's Age of Barbarians right there. Cut the Ropes on there. Disney's water game. What is it? I forget the name of it. By the way, that was a WebGL example. The phone does support WebGL. And as we'll talk later, I'll talk about a few of the APIs that it supports. Just several different games. There's Cut the Rope. This is an app that was developed by, most of these that I'm showing there are indie developed apps. There was only one commercial app that you saw there. They're all individuals who just wrote either using Canvas tag programming or WebGL and wrote an example and put it on the phone. And it also does, if you're interested, it also supports asm.js if you're using it as well. All right, so those just gives you a spackling of the type of things that are available currently. Now, that said, like I said earlier, the only thing different between your standard web app and a Firefox OS app is the manifest and some additional APIs that we added to Gecko in order to interact with the actual hardware. Got to have the camera, right? And things like that, the geolocation and stuff like that. So I know everyone can read that, and there'll be a test at the end of the class on whether you knew what that was. Essentially, I just put this in there for the slides will be available. You can just click on it. This is the location where we maintain what APIs are in the OS and what track they are on as far as getting certified and things like that in standards boards. And then you got color coding to tell you what device they're available for, whether are Firefox to browse or Firefox OS to phone and things like that. So all of our web APIs are covered in that. So the next slide I'm going to show you is these are just a smattering of the APIs that are available for any app. It doesn't have to be privileged. You can sit on your website. And we just added recently the final 2 APIs for WebRTC. So you can do WebRTC communication calls with this, have conference calling, the whole thing on the phone now. So all 3 APIs for that are available. We have vibration for vibrating, screen orientation, geolocation, battery status, things like that. Things that you're going to use in some of them, like the ambient light sensor or the proximity sensor. Those are both APIs for the hardware that's in the phone that can be used in your apps. I saw one game where a guy had a dragon game. It's a really nice game. But to make the dragon breathe fire, you got to run your hand across the phone like that, which to me would get real aggravating. But we got file handle API for handling files. And I'm going to talk about web activity shortly, so I'm not going to cover that just yet. But let me show you a couple real quick examples. The battery object here, you can see we have 4 event listeners added to it: level change, charging time, and discharging time, and you can just add an event handler for those and get notified when those things change. You can also just go out and read the current level of charging where the phone's at right now, and you can put that in your app if you want to use it. Here's a geolocation API. Now, as I said earlier, there's certain APIs that require a higher level of privilege. And while this API doesn't require a higher level of privilege, it does require a permission in the manifest file. And that's what you see at the bottom, permissions, geolocation, and then you tell why you want that particular thing. And then the user is prompted, like you see over here on the right, to use the geolocation service. And in this particular case, we just call get current position. It returns a success handler with the position, and you can get the coordinates, latitude and longitude up here. And I'm just pumping those into an HTML. I think it was a label. Yeah. I'm going to try to go through these in a quick fashion because I want to get to the actual demos. All right, and then we have the notification API, which is just basically this little notification you see at the top. And essentially, it's really just new notification, and you specify several of the properties for the notification in the middle right here, if you can see that. The other parts are for requesting permission, and you can, that asks the user if it's okay to be notified from that particular app. And you can turn that off just by adding that manifest permission down at the bottom. Okay, web payments. You gotta, currently the Firefox Marketplace and Firefox OS, they really support 3 methods for making money if you're developing apps for the device itself. One is you can sell your apps to the marketplace. You can also do in-app payments, and then you can also use like interactive ads and things like that. And so I put some links in here for each one of them. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, but I will say the MozPay API is an API that's used, it's a real simple API used for actually putting it in your code and selling your app or selling your feature. Maybe you want to add a level to your game or something like this. And we have this FXPay wrapper library that simplifies it a little bit, so you can take a look at both of those. And then I put a link in there for validating a receipt. When your app starts up, if it's got in-app payments where people have purchased portions of it, you validate your receipt just to make sure they haven't returned the good and the app works like it's supposed to. So I put links in for all of those. This is not technically a web API for Firefox OS. It's for anything, but is used extensively for switching apps. When your app goes to the background, you can actually do something in your code. So you can add a visibility change, event handler. You can see I'm doing that, and when it's hidden, I'm just doing a console log. When it brings back to the front, that I'm showing it, doing another console log. This is it has focus. Anybody familiar with web workers? Okay, well, web workers in this particular case just running a separate piece of JS on a thread. And Firefox OS, starting with version 1.3, support it. In this particular case, I'm launching a worker thread. This is the code for it down at the bottom. And what I'm doing is setting a message handler on the worker thread that says, when I get a message back from the worker, do this alert. And then I'm posting a message to the worker. And then in the worker.js, all I have in is an event handler that says, hey, as soon as I get a message, wait 1 to 3 seconds and post hi back to the data that was passed to me. So in this case, it'll just post hi, John. So that's what web workers are. All right, anybody familiar with promises? All right. So we just added support in 1.4, which was released back in the summer for Firefox OS to use promises. And a lot of the APIs are going to be moving to that direction. They're not there yet, but a lot of them will be moving to the promise format. So this essentially just does a promise and resolves in 1 to 3 seconds, and then it alerts that once you get the resolve. All right, the privilege type APIs. That's the next level down in the list of APIs. We have a device storage API. That's for writing to the pictures and things like that. We have a browser API, so you can include a small browser inside your app if you want to. Sockets API. We actually have someone wrote a Firefox OS device to be used as a web server. So you can just put it out there and use it as a web server. And they use the socket API for that. Contacts API for writing to the contacts. And has anybody used a System XHR before? Okay, we'll discuss that in a minute. But then you can, the keyboard that comes up on a Firefox OS device, you can replace that as well. And we added a new, version 2.0, we added the camera API and the camera control API to this level. They used to be certified. And we got a lot of grief for that. Now they're in there. And one particular note we've added is NFC, which is pretty cool because you go up to a device. I think we got a video of someone buying something from a vending machine just by holding their phone up next to it, which is pretty cool. And inside it, you can use that API inside it to do things like, if I have a web page I want to share with you real quick, just bring it to your phone and just slide it over your phone. But the only thing, when you use any of these APIs, you have to put type privileged in the manifest. That's the only addition you have to add, and then you add the permission for that particular API. Give an example. Here's the contacts API. We add the contacts permission, access, read, write, and in this particular case, we create a new Moz contact object, and it's a JSON formatted array of properties for the contact. And then once we've created it, we save it, and you get an on success and on error handler for it. Not too tough, is it? Okay. Device storage API, I talked about that one earlier, is just basically getting access to the SD card. And you, for whatever area you're accessing, whether it's the SD card, pictures, gallery, you have to put that in your manifesto here at the bottom. And then you can just do add name. That's just adding a V card to the SD card. Cross-domain XML HTTP request. If you're writing an app that goes out and gets data from another website, you've probably ran into this piece of code before or have done something similar. And it's been in the web for a decade. And frankly, I hate it, but because it causes us more issues than anything. But you just do you create the XML HTTP request. In this particular case, you just have to pass this Moz system parameter. You do an XHR open, get the URL, and then you check it. So when it's on ready state change, you'll get notified, and the 200 means it's okay, and you can actually read the content. You also get an on error. But this, after you create the request, you have to use the send. And that's the permission that's required. It's a privilege level API to make that call. And we do that because web injection and all the things that can go wrong with that if it's not a privileged app and has not been looked at by the marketplace team is a security risk. And does anybody follow the Mozilla Hacks blog? Well, if you don't, you ought to start doing that. But we just talked yesterday that in FireFox 39, this API is going to have a replacement in a promise format with using the Fetch API. And it's pretty cool. So if you want to use that to get content, you can use this desktop Firefox OS. It doesn't matter. It's just a web API. And it's in FireFox 39. I don't know if it's in Chrome yet or not. All right, certified. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about these because, frankly, you can't access them currently. The only reason I put them in here is because a lot of these will be moved to the privilege level. We got SMS, power management. You can get Wi-Fi API, Wi-Fi information, which is very sensitive for a lot of people. That's why it's not in the privilege level. And things like that. And by the way, we also do support push notifications. So your server has an update for it. We have a push notification system that can be used as well. So you get all the same features you would with a standard mobile operating system. And we are also working on service workers. Currently, if you write a FireFox OS app, there's a feature called App Cache. And what that allows it to do, you think, well, it's a web app. How in the world are they going to run it offline? Well, keep in mind where we're putting these phones is in a lot of places is developing countries, and they don't necessarily have the Wi-Fi connectivity that we have, or it's very, very pricey. So we have this app cache feature that allows you to cache certain artifacts so the app can run smoothly even offline. And the methodology for doing that will be changing to use the new service worker spec. All right, web activities, this will probably be the last API I talk about. All right, web activities is, well, what if I want to use one of those privileged APIs, but I want a hosted app? Well, then it gets a little sticky, right? So if I want to write a contact, but I can't do that with a hosted app, that seems very restrictive. So we created this an API called Web Activities. And all it is it's kind of like Web Intents, if you've ever used those on Android or anything like that. And what it does is it puts a user interaction in the place of an API. For example, I want an image. So I make a call saying to a Mozilla activity pick, and it'll list all the apps that can handle that particular pick. And that'll be your gallery, your camera, and then they switch that. So essentially, they switch to the other application, and it allows them to pick that, and then they come back. So it puts the user involved in it. I'll give you another example. You cannot dial a phone. You cannot dial a phone with FireFox OS in an app, unless you're a certified app. So, but with a Mozilla activity, you can say dial, put a number, and it'll launch the dialer application with the number already filled out. But the user has to hit send. So that's the intent of the web activities, is basically put a user interaction in between it. And right now we have several keywords. This list is not restrictive, meaning you can add any web activity name you want as long as you have a handler for it somewhere. And in the case, say, for example, dial. Well, there's only one app on the FireFox OS system that handles a dial activity, and that's the dialer app. But if you do a pick, you may want to pick a website, pick a image, or something like that. So these are the ones that we have in there currently. A new supports things like doing a mail or an SMS or a contact. And let me give you a little bit more detail on how this works.
This is actually the receiver manifest. These are pieces that you add to your manifest to handle this feature. And if you were writing an app that provided a picture, this is what you would have to do. In this particular case, you want to support the pick operation. And then you supply the filters of all the types of artifacts that you will handle. In this case, I'm being very redundant by saying I want all images plus images JPEG and PNG, which is absolutely ignorant. I should be slapped for my bad code. And then you basically tell it whether your app is going to handle that in the same window or open a new window for it, and whether it returns a value. And then the last piece is where in your code is this handled. And in your code, you would do something like this. Set message handler activity. You see that on the top row here? I'll highlight it. See that? All right. So, and then once you get this activity, you want to look to check the name to make sure it's a pick operation. And then you know you're going to be handling that picture. So you do something and you post a result back, or you post an error. That's what you do. In this particular case, you somehow or another you get a picture. I don't specify how in this example, but you do. And then from the person who wants to use your activity or any activity in the system, all they have to do is say new Moz activity, and you say the name of the keyword that I talked about earlier, and then you apply the data, and you're saying I want a image JPEG. Give me, and then what the OS will do is then it'll list out all the apps in the system that handle that operation. So if you have, if you supply an image somehow, and it happens to be a JPEG, your app would be listed right here. And so it puts that user interaction in between it. Then they get to pick the app they want to do it with. Think about sharing. If I want to share a link or something, share on Facebook, share on Twitter, those are type of activities. And then in your code for your app, once that pick activity comes back, you have to do something with it. In this particular case, I just I check to see if it's an image first or a blob, and I just create an image source and shove the results into it. So it adds an image to my web app. And I'm going to show an example of that in just a second. All right, remember I talked about the dial operation. Here's the dial activity, and there's the number. Pre-populates the number, and that's it. Here's an example of adding a contact. So I just say new, type, web contacts, and I give it the parameters, and that adds the contact for you. But they have to hit the done button up here. Make sense? All right. All of the APIs that are available, most of them are covered in this sample app. It's called the FireFox OS boilerplate. If you just Google that, you'll find the GitHub location for it. But I also put it on the thumb drive they're going to put it on the website of all the code that you're going to see here in just a second, and all the, like this, all the apps that I'm going to show as well. So, but it basically gives you all the operations, like take a picture, dial a number, send a SMS, share a URL, pick an image, things like that. All right, now, you say, well, if I don't want to write a FireFox OS app, what good is learning all of this you just learned? Well, it's also available if you have Fennec installed, which is Firefox for Android, installed on your Android device. Those same apps can run there as well. And we have a couple ways of doing that. The Marketplace has a feature called APK Factory. So if you submit your app to the Firefox OS Marketplace, it'll automatically generate an APK for you if you just run a command. If you have Firefox OS on your device and you go to the Firefox Marketplace, it'll automatically generate the APK and install it on your device. And I'm going to show that in just a second. Right here, I'm just showing a little bumper game. I wrote a little pool game, and I'm pushing it to the Android simulator right there. And you can see it's on there on both. That's not living proof. I'll show you in just a second. You can do it, like I said, do it automatically. And if you wanted to side load it yourself, this is what you just run a curl on the APK Factory here and pass it your manifest URL, and you'll get back this APK, and then you can just use the standard ADB install name of the APK file. So this part's not so important unless you were just sitting there developing and you wanted to play with it before you actually installed it on a device, and you wanted to push it to your simulator, things like that. So that said, let me show that real quick. Okay. Like I said, 3 different devices. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. All right.
I'm using Droid@Screen. Has anybody ever used that? It's inherently slow, I can tell you that. It doesn't do full motion video very well at all. All right, so I'm going to go to the Firefox Marketplace on my device, and hopefully you'll see it update. Oh, wait a second. Might help if I turn the hotspot on. All right, should work now, hopefully. All right, you see I have Firefox installed on there. Let's try that again. All right. All right, so this is the marketplace, and I'm going to search for a game that I know the developer did. It's going to update a lot faster here than you're seeing it. All right, can you see where it says Hungry Fridge? I'm going to hit, you see the little install button beside it? This is a Firefox OS app. And I'm going to click install on that. All right, and it's going to ask me, it's going to prompt me to do where I want to put it. And it's installing. All right, now it's done installing. I'm going to hit open to run the game. And you can't tell it from that video, but it's updating a lot faster here. Come on. All right. And all this is you just, it's one of those games where you select it's got fruit flying out and you just click on it. And I don't know if you see, it's just not, the Droid@Screen doesn't update that fast. Pretty cool, huh? So if you write a Firefox OS app, it can also be deployed to Android very simply, and you never have to write a lick of Java. So I think that's pretty cool. All right. All right. A couple other things that we provide now. Is anybody familiar with Cordova? All right. Well, so the Cordova project is basically Adobe's open source version of PhoneGap. You know what PhoneGap is? PhoneGap allows you to write apps in HTML5, and they'll push them to the device and do the conversion for you, whether it be Objective-C, Android, or whatever. So we just added, last year, the year before last, right at the end of the year, we added support for Firefox OS in that algorithm. Now, the funny thing is, they have to do a compilation step for the other ones. We're HTML5, so they're HTML5, we're HTML5. It wasn't that difficult to do a conversion. But right now we support 15 different plugins with the Cordova format, and that's for device orientation, file transfers, geolocation, those type of things. And you can see right there, I have a link in there if you want to go look at Cordova. But a couple things we have for it. PhoneGap has this developer app. All it is a framework strapper that allows other apps to be run on top of it. And when you run those apps, if you make code changes, it automatically does the compilation for you and spits out the updated app as you're working. It's a live app. We do have that for Firefox OS too. So if you're making changes in your HTML editor, they'll automatically show up on a PhoneGap device. And multiple devices. It can be, you can have your iPhone connected, your Android device, and your Firefox OS device, and all three of them will be updating at the same time. So we do have that in our marketplace as well, so you can download that app and use it as well. Here's just a couple screenshots from our Cordova sample app. We have a sample. I actually wrote this app, and that's a WebGL globe there in the middle, and a very ugly compass right there. But for all the 15 plugins, we got examples of using each one of them if you're interested in Cordova. Here's an example of one, the device orientation. When it lets you do a watch on the compass, and in this particular case on the current heading, I think is what I'm using.
magnetic heading. And what I'm doing here is just passing in that for every 300 milliseconds, I want to fire a read on the compass. And then it just gives me back that, and I update my graphic to show the needle moving. Here's that WebGL one, and it's similar to our API. You'll notice it isn't exactly like our API, and that was the only conversion our plugins had to do, is their version of HTML5 to our version of HTML5. All right, to install Cordova, it's pretty simple. Just use, it's a node module. Just install -g Cordova, and then Cordova, to create a project, you just say Cordova create hello, the name of the project, and then in this particular example, I'm creating hello world. I CD to the hello directory, and typically at this point you would add a platform. So you'd say add iOS, or you would add Android. In this case, we've added FireFox OS, so to add FireFox OS. And in our example, all you have to do is run a prepare statement. If you're using the other ones, you have to also do a compilation step. We don't have that one. And then you can add specific plugins. So if you're going to use a geolocation, you just say plugin.add, and you specify the plugin name for whatever feature plugin you want to use. And we wrote an article about it. You can check it out on our Hacks blog. All right. So now I'm going to discuss some of the tools that we have available to us, and I'm going to do that live, if everybody's okay with that. Because slides are painful, are they not? All right, one of the things I'm going to talk about is, this is the developer, you get to the developer tools. I'm using Firefox Developer Edition, and let me tell you what that means. It's Firefox with most of the debugger tools, developer tools already enabled, and more of the experimental APIs are already enabled as well. So it's an early edition of what's going to come out in our final version, but it'll also have all the features that you need enabled, like Web IDE, which I'm going to show right now. All right, so this is the Web IDE. This is basically an editor, and you can use it as an editor, and to edit web apps and things like that. And I'm gonna open an app. Here we have you can create a new app from here, open a packaged app, or open a hosted app. Remember what I told you the difference between those were? The packaged and the hosted. And so in this particular case, I'm going to open one I have for the presentation. Let's see. All right, this is my ugly, ugly game. It's called Paddle Squirrel, because I think kayaking squirrels are just funny. All right, so now to run this, I can do a lot of things. Here's where I can edit things. I can actually look at my images. There's my kayak. These are my image assets that I'm using in the app. Things like that. I can also look at my JS code here and edit it. So, if you look at the code, please don't send me emails about how bad my code is. Okay. All right. So I can make changes to it and save it. It also has a manifest validator. Remember the manifest file we're talking about? And you probably ain't no way you're going to be able to see that, is there? Let me see if I can. Yeah. All right. Well. All right, so let me just make a change to it real quick. I made a change to it that actually broke it. I just removed it and I save it, and you notice that it does automatic validation on the manifest files. There's a little red icon up at the top. Let me put it back. All right. So those are the types of changes you can make, and like I said, it'll validate it for you. Over here is my runtime. This is where I specify where I want to run the app. And in this particular case, we have several simulators, versions of FireFox OS, and then we also have Chrome desktop, so you can run it. If you want to debug Chrome, you can debug Chrome on your desktop. You can also debug Chrome on Android device, and you can also debug Safari on iOS. So I'm going to start up the simulator. I'm going to install my game on it, and you can see I actually wrote this game to have 4 touch points. You steer it around the rocks based on whether you're paddling forwards, backwards. The screen's divided into 4.
Okay, so that's pretty much how the simulator works, and you can choose it for all our different versions. But in this case, I'm going to connect my flame device. For some reason, it's not showing up in my list. There it goes. Okay, and let me switch over to this and open that web ID back up. All right, so this is me connected to my device, and you'll see, you probably can't see the thing there. It's basically asking me for permission to connect to the device. So I'm going to hit OK. And you can see this is my FireFox OS device. The way I debug any app is, let me open up another app. This is the boilerplate app I talked to you about earlier. Okay, I can run that on there, just run it on the device just by hitting that. Okay, and you can see the boilerplate app. And with my manifest, all my files. I can stop the app, or I can also debug it by hitting the wrench. These are the FireFox OS, Firefox developer tools in general. But these are the ones that are available currently in the Web IDE. Now, I will say that the version of Web IDE I'm using is actually a nightly, so it does have a few issues that I'll have to circumvent around, but you'll see what I'm talking about shortly. All right, so notice how I'm using, this is the inspector. All I'm doing is running my mouse up and down HTML, and I'm getting highlighted where the area is at. That's pretty cool, isn't it? All right, I can do a lot of things with that. So, for example, this is what we call, it's a selector, element selector. If I click on it, notice how it stays dark, and then I click something on that phone, you'll notice it highlights that particular node in my browser. And in this particular case, I want to make a change. So I'm going to say pick my image. Or how about pick any image? That's better. All right, and you notice it changed on my phone. Can y'all see that? I need to slide it over some. Maybe. Okay. All right, so I can do other things too. I can select the body tag, and you can see these are my CSS styles. These are computed styles, the actual computed styles that come through, the fonts that are used. I'm gonna read it up. Okay. It took a while, but it's there. The boxing model, so it shows all your paddings and margins. And then if you had animations, you can actually click through the animations and it'll show the animations in the browser. All right, but I can do things like, let's go change, I want to select the element and say, let's add background. Notice it's got code complete. All right, notice I get an alert anytime there's an error, basically saying it's an invalid property value. But I'm going to type in red. And you can see my background changed to red. All right. Let me show one other thing in that. If I'm going to do that element selector again, oh, actually, let me show you this first. See these little bubbles? Can you see that little, it says EV? You're probably having a hard time reading that, but this essentially just shows you all the events that are attached to a particular node. And it'll show you what standard they're using, and it actually does jQuery too. So if you're using jQuery, it'll show you the jQuery code as well. And you can look at the code just by clicking on it here, and this is the code that's going to run on that particular event. I can also hit the pause button here to actually go to the debugger and see where in the debugger it's at. And this is on click. I'm trying to remember what the command is for blowing up the screen a little bit. Anybody remember? Can y'all read that? That a little bit better? Yeah. All right. So going back to the inspector, you can see that I can, like I said, I can fool the styles and things like that, and I can also click on that. Here's the console, and what the console lists is essentially any errors, CSS errors, and you can also track network traffic like system XHR request. It does logging, but you can also interact with the JS context in a particular page. So, for example, if I want to say alert, and this, you notice I get an alert on my phone.
I can also, I can do, it has code complete. I'm doing navigator. I can inspect an object. Like I want to run and see if I'm online. And the answer is false. No, I'm not. So I can run my JavaScript code there as well. I go back to the inspector, and I'm going to run this pick image command. And this is actually that web activity. Notice how I got gallery and camera. Okay. So I choose gallery, and I choose a microphone. I got a picture of my microphone at home. And you notice it adds the picture of the in my app. Now I can use that selector again, click on the button, and it shows me that image. And you can see it's right there. I can right click on it and just delete node. And take it away. I can also just refresh the app at any time doing that. Okay, I'm going to step into the debugger real quick. Oh, one other quick one I want to show you. This is a new feature that we're starting. It's called timeline. And what it allows you to do is you get to track, you can filter, you can track the memory, but you can also filter on restyles, reflows, paint events, DOM events, and any function calls. And it's pretty cool. This is experimental, so I'm certain nothing will go wrong. But I'm going to start that up. And the timeline's running now. And I'm going to go through that same process of just picking that image. All right, then I'm going to stop this. All right, now I'm going to drill into this particular area right here. You can just select an area and drill into it. And you'll notice that I got some console activity. I'll explain that in a minute. I have a DOM event, a couple function calls, a restyle, a reflow, and then this paint operation. That paint operation is when the image is actually being painted. And you use this to determine where you're getting, where you want to stack your reflows together and your restyles together so you get better performance in your app. And if you look, the console activity there was just, I put some console logging. You can actually time everything in your JavaScript code by looking at, where did I put it? Yeah. Console time activity in your JavaScript. Can y'all see that? All right, so then I end it, and it gives me the console log. So that shows up in timeline. I think that's a pretty cool little process. Okay, let me just quickly show the debugger. All right, I'm going to put I'm in the JavaScript debugger now. I can set a breakpoint by clicking on just set my breakpoints here, my controls. I got a call stack for nested calls. I can also disable it by doing that. You ever step into a piece of JavaScript code that's minified and you really don't want to fool with it, so you just black box it and it doesn't step through it. You can also prettify the source, and then you can disable or enable all your breakpoints. And let me show you, if I pick that image again, you notice it stops on my breakpoint. And you can look, here's my variables. I got function scope and global scope, and I can do things like on the anonymous scoped. I can click on this little, can't click on it because it's too small. All right, and it'll take me to the node inspector where that's at. If I go back to the debugger, I can also trap any event that happens on the page. In this example, we have 30 nodes that have click events on them. So I can click that and disable my breakpoint and play that out. And then I can click on that node again. And you notice it stops at that particular point. And I can step through the code using the controls and run it through. It's standard debug features. So let me just turn that back off and play it out. All right, not only can you debug the standard apps, but you can also debug the system apps that are on here. So I'm going to scroll down here and you'll see the system apps, and I'm going to click home screen. This is the home screen that you're looking at. So if I go to my inspector, it'll show my HTML code for that. I'm going to scroll over and you can see it's selecting things, right? So I can use my selector, pick that. That's my FireFox logo, and that's a little div. Up here is some, some of the element styling for it. Let me scale that because that one's really important that you use that one. All right, so I can also, let's say, slide down here, select the grid. That's the entire grid. I can go into my style editor which contains all the styles for the particular page. I can then turn off styles to see what effect it has on them. See, it gets quite ugly quick. And then I can also look at, this is that grid you saw. I can do things like, let's add a transform, rotate. Oh, did I spell it wrong? No, I didn't. All right, you see how it's rotating my screen? So you can debug the system apps like that as well. And this is a style editor. I can change my styles and save them as well here. All right, let me show you another little new feature that we've added. That paddle squirrel game, I'm going to open it back up. All right, I'm going to run that on my device, debug it. There's something called the canvas editor, and this will let me inspect the WebGL context or the canvas context when you're doing graphics, which is important, especially if you're doing games. If I take a screenshot of that, it'll take a snapshot anytime I want it to, and it'll tell me how that particular frame was built. And so you can look at it, it does translate, and it does a draw image. I have two images actually drawn. That's the background of the river you saw. And then I translate. I'm actually rotating the angle of the boat, whatever angle it's at, and then I draw the boat. And if it comes in, there it goes. And then I got a few other draw images for the wake on the boat and things like that. But you can actually just see how the image is constructed. That works for both WebGL contexts and canvas context, which is really a nice little feature. You can also dig into the code right here for it too. All right, let me show you a little bit on the Scratchpad. On Scratchpad, I can do things like window. I can display that or inspect it. So if I inspect it, it'll show me all the properties. Scratchpad's kind of like the console, except it's multi-line supported. And then I can do things like, I can also display a value. So it does basically an eval, 4 plus 5. And it'll do the calculation for me. One other thing it has, let me show you this. This is a little app that does essentially nothing, except has a stubbed out function call called draw ball or something like that. So when I hit run code, nothing happens. And I can take the Scratchpad and I can open a file and have it, run in the context of the page. So in this particular case, I have 2 draw files. Draw 1, which is just this came from an example where I wanted to draw a ball on a canvas tag, and I had to draw these images on top of each other to create a 3D effect. So what I was doing was I was looping 60 counts per frame, which can't be very efficient, right? So I created this draw ball function, and I wanted to test it. So I run this, and now when I select that, you see the little ball bouncing around, right? I can open up another file. The second, I wanted 2 tests so I could check performance on them. In this particular case, did it open? Yeah. I am using an off-screen canvas to go through the iteration of the 60 once, move it off to an off-screen canvas, and then just replace that canvas piece with just one draw operation per screen update. And so if I run that, I just changed the color of the ball a little bit so you could see there was a change. And you can look at the frame rate. We have tools for looking at the frame rate inside of the device, and we also have a few here too. For example, if I go back to that paddle squirrel game, because it's a big pig, All right. I can then select the runtime thing up, menu bar up here, and I can say monitor. And let me refresh it. And it should start showing me my actual memory usage. And it does. You can see it's tracking real time how much memory I'm using as the app's playing. And it's monstrous, if you'll see, 58 megabytes. That's a pretty cool little feature. All right. Stop that. Let me show you a couple other tools outside of FireFox OS because they don't run so well with that editor. If I go into that same app, and open it up in my browser, I select Tools, Web Developer, Toggle Tools, and then I look at this thing called Web Audio. Now, I wrote this example to use the Web Audio API. And if you see, you'll notice that right now I have a audio buffer source, a gain, and a destination. And every noise you see happening, it adds another node, which get cleaned up on garbage collection. Here's the main node, and it's essentially a background noise, and you'll notice it's set to 0. I actually went to the Niagara River, and I recorded the sound for what was going on. Can y'all hear that? So you can actually use the Web Audio Editor to make real-time modifications to any of your Web Audio nodes, which I think is a pretty cool feature. Another thing you can do is this Performance tab. Now, we're still working on this one, but it's getting a lot better. If you've used our old tools, they can be quite cumbersome. But if I hit the track button, play a little bit, and then turn it off, you'll notice I get a timeline down at the bottom here. And this is I should have turned that game off. It's a sampling engine that basically takes samples of where you're at from a time perspective. And I can then look at my minimum and maximum frame rates. And that you can see where that would be nice. You can also check I believe it gives you the average as well. And then you can also see where you're spending your time, whether it's in network, JavaScript compilation, garbage collection, styles, graphics, and most of mine's going to be in the graphics or the gecko layer. So then I can actually then select an area and then drill into that area so I can get further details on it. And this is all, if I look down here, here's the actual call stack that you can then dig into and look where your time is being spent. And I won't go through the categories because frankly we're running out of time, but essentially you have the total time that it's burning in that particular function call. So you can actually go modify it based on that, see where you're spending the most time. So between the monitoring real-time memory, taking the timeline, using that to optimize your reflows, and using this tool, you've got a nice set of tools that we've got together for maintaining memory management and performance of HTML devices. Let me show you one other one we have. Let's see, here's a WebGL example. All right, so this is a WebGL example running in my browser. There's a new tool, let me turn it on. If I go to shader editor and reload that page, I get my vertex and fragment shader code right there. And what's nice about it's live editing. So if I make a change to my fragment shader, let's say I get the live change. All right, let me change my ambient light and my diffusing light. See how dark that got? Let's go back the other way. So it allows you to debug your shader code on the fly. And if you're using WebGL, that's a pretty dang nice little feature to have. And by the way, WebGL 2.0 just it might be in beta, released in beta already. So you might want to take a look at that. That just came out I believe was this week. And Unity and Unreal already have versions for WebGL too, if you're a game developer. Okay. Now let me show you real quick connecting to my iPhone using Valence. Valence is what we call the little tool for connecting to different devices. Turn off that. Okay. I'm gonna, instead of using the camera here, I'm gonna use QuickTime, because it's got this little neat feature, and I can say movie recording, and I can specify it's an iPhone somewhere. Come on. Try that again. Now this isn't a Mozilla product that's screwing up here. Just want to state that. All right, maybe I just have to show it with the screen. That was not the intent. All right. I'll try one more thing. All right, I'll skip on that. All right, let me open that camera back up. Can everybody see my iPhone there? Close enough? Okay. If I go to my tools, and go to Web Developer, Web IDE, I said earlier, you can select the runtime you want. In this particular case, I'm using Safari on iOS. All right, and you get the blue connection saying it's connected. If I scroll down here, the open web page will now show up in this list, so I can select it. And then select the inspector, and we do get a timeout issue for some reason, and I don't know why, and it'll happen in just a second. But you notice how I'm selecting these items and they're showing up on my iPhone? I can do things like, let's open up this middle container and change this title. You can make changes and it'll show up on you see it change right up there, barely can see that. I can also change styling and things like that. So if I look at the inspector here, let's go to open the body, and I'm going to go down to that. You see that green around the bottom? That's the padding. So if I select that item, I can, make changes to the padding. Say, all right, you see how it's changing the padding live, and then I can do things like, use my image selector here. There's a cartoon in the middle. I don't know if you can see it or not. I just highlighted it, and you notice that I get the actual image in my developer tool as well. What image is actually being used there? Things like that. I can also go to my console and do things like, let's do an alert. Oh. And I can't type. And I get my alert on my iPhone. And I also can do things like, let's see, document. I cannot spell. The div statements. Gummit. All right. I'll ever see anybody type so badly? I can't, for some reason, I'm mistyping it. But you can also enable a style editor, so I can go, oh, here's the background. Let me change the background color to blue. You see it change. I can change my text justification, things like that. All right. And you can, again, you can save them, things like that. The JavaScript debugger works slightly. We're still working on it. But there's a little JavaScript MVC example there. Let's see if it'll let me connect to it. It's still connected. I'm going to see if it found that page. Yep. And I'm going to go to my debugger. There's a controller for every time you add something. I'm just going to put a breakpoint on add item. And then if I, well, this is not going to work so well. Just going to put any text in there. And you see it stops on my debugger. And this is this is Safari on iOS. It requires 7 or above, by the way. All right, so that's essentially probably all I'll show because we are running out of time there. But I want to show a couple more things too in here. All right, I showed you this is the Web IDE monitor. I just have these as backup in case things break. We also have the network monitor, so you can actually get the amount of time that it's being spent on pulling in resources. All down here, it's just changed the color schemes. All I did. You can also see what it looks like cached versus not cached. We got new tools where you slide over and see transforms. You can actually see the page change, things like that. We can also inspect. We now have believe it or not, we have a storage inspector that is similar to what Chrome has. You can inspect IndexedDB and things like that, and your cookies and things like that. All right, this is the valence piece I was showing you. And Safari requires Safari 7. Android requires 37 for Chrome 37 to use it. And here's a particular item that's called Node FireFox. And you saw I did a lot of work in the Web IDE. A lot of people don't want to replace their IDE. So what this particular project means to do is it's a set of node modules that allow you to integrate the Web IDE functionalities directly into the command line. And right now I'm just launching the simulator and installing an app on the simulator with those particular commands. It's pretty simple. And these are the modules that we currently support, which are finding simulators, install app, find an app, launch an app. So you can do those type of things directly from the command line. So you can work them into your whatever your given tool chain is. All right, so that's probably all I'll talk about, but I do want to give you a couple of links that you might want to watch. There's the Hacks blog. You might want to take a look at it. We put up all the latest stuff that's coming out in the APIs on it and things like that. And there's obviously MDN. And who's ever used MDN before? Okay. And that's all I got. Take some questions if anybody has any.
Is there any kind of APIs for handling application secrets, like keys and whatnot?
Yeah, well, so the particular payment API that you saw uses a Java web token, which is using payment secrets. We don't have anything on the device for handling your own secrets yet, but we're working on Web Crypto. The Web Crypto API will be available hopefully soon. Right now we have 3 Firefox OS versions in development: 2.0, 2.2, and 3.0. 3.0 is going to be much different, but 2.0 and 2.2 are the ones that are going on a lot of the phones right now. Any other question?
Is there any possibility for Firefox OS to be available in the US?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you saw earlier, I did that Verizon slide for a reason, where we talk about where Firefox, obviously the TV is going to be available this year. It's going to be available this summer. We're working with Verizon on several types of phone designs, but they're not going to be available until 2016. As far as when it comes in the U.S., I cannot give an answer to that yet. But what I will tell you is, I can use it now. I can use it with T-Mobile, so it works fine for me now. And I just had one of these reference phones with a SIM card put in it. Yeah.
Do you have anything? I guess. Would it be similar to setting up, how do I rephrase this? Anything to advertise in the middle of the app? So, there was...
We have in-app, in-app
advertisements that run, and you receive payments for that completely separate.
Yep, you do. Yeah, so we have standard support for most of the JavaScript libraries for interactive and things like that. So you can do ads. I don't know many Firefox OS apps that don't have an ad in them. There's a lot of them, especially on the free ones. That's a primary way a lot of people make money on them. So yep, definitely have that. Any other questions? Has this been informative? Okay. All right, well, if no one else has any other questions, if you want to take a look at the phone, come up here and you can play with it and do whatever you want to. It's already a dirty screen, so I'm not too worried about that. All right, well, thank you.